Hello everyone and welcome back to the YellowDog 3D Tips blog. Today we're going to be having a look at the new XGen interactive Groom toolkit inside of Maya 2017. So I've just got this starting model, and you can just find this in your content browser under bipeds, and it's just the basic head. And what I've actually done is duplicated it and sort of deleted the faces I don't want the hair to grow out of, so I've just left with this sort of hair shape, and this is going to be really useful. So what I'm actually going to do now is go to the plugin manager and just make sure that XGen is definitely loaded. So what I'm going to do is just select this separated piece of geometry and go to generate and create interactive Groom splines and click the little box next to it. I'm just going to reset the settings, so we need to give it a description name, so I'll just call this one haircut 01, and this density slider controls how many hairs are going to be created, and you can see the approximate spline count is approximately how many hairs are going to be created, and the CV count is how many sections each hair has. So I'm going to up that to 12 to make a more natural looking hair, and if you click create you should end up with something that looks like this. If you didn't see that, then you need to go to your preferences, go to display, and you might need to change this rendering engine to something like OpenGL Legacy. So now if we have a look at this new options window that we've got at the side, you can see we've got a haircut 01 description, and we've actually got this new feature which is sculpt layers, and you can actually put different sculpting effects onto different layers and keyframe them. And right at the bottom we've got our collection, which is haircut 01 base. So to make our lives a little bit easier with this, Autodesk have included this new workspace called XGen Interactive Groom workspace, and you can see we've got our attributes editor at the bottom and our tool settings. So if I just move this density slider in the attributes editor, you're going to see it's going to create more of these XGen hairs, and with the interactive Groom toolset, what you see is what you get, so that is what it's going to look like when it renders, and I just think that's a really easy system. So next I'm going to go to generate interactive grooming tools, and I'm just going to break off these grooming tools so we've got easy access to them, and these are all the standard tools that you would usually get with XGen, but you can paint them in real time and get feedback in the viewport straight away. So I'm going to go to the tool settings and just reset the tool, and each brush comes with symmetry settings. So if I put this to object X, you'll see that we're going to get the same effect on both sides, and it's mirroring that brush over. So what I'm going to do now is start to refine this haircut. So if I go back to the haircut 01 base collection and go down to the attributes editor, and all I've done is just increase the density multiplier slider until the hairs sort of just cover the head. And the next thing I'm going to do is just get this density brush and go to the tool settings and go to paint operation and set that to decrease, and I'll put the strength to actually we want this at 100. So this brush is just going to basically allow us to paint away some of those XGen hairs from the areas where we don't want any hairs. I've already set this symmetry of this brush up so it's mirroring what I do on this side to the other side, and I'm just going to sort of refine the hairline until it sort of starts to look a little bit more natural. So as you can see, I've just sped this part of the tutorial up because it's really straightforward what I'm doing. I'm just taking away those hairs from the areas where I don't want any. And here we are, I've just trimmed back that hairline to make it look a little bit more natural. So if I select the length brush and I'll just reset that, and I'll just make sure this operation is set to scale, and I can actually increase or decrease the length of the hair with this. So I've just set that increment to -1, and you'll see if I just paint, that's going to decrease the hair length drastically. So I might want to change the strength of this right down, so I'll put that to just like 2.5. You can see I can really gently reduce the length of hairs in areas, but there's a great new tool, and that's the cut brush. And basically if I just set the symmetry to X, I can literally just click in the viewport and trim the hair really easily. But as you can see, there's a problem, and it's missing the hairs that are further away. So if I change this back face cutoff angle to its maximum, which is 180 degrees, that's going to catch all those back hairs as well and allow me to trim them all in one go. So what I'm aiming for is sort of a 1940s style, sort of a slick haircut. So I want to trim these sideburns right down. I'm going to trim the back down as well massively, and it's just super quick and easy to take away the length of the hair in areas just with this cut brush. So obviously I want the back to be quite short, I don't want him having a mullet. And that's looking pretty good. I think the length is more or less where we want to have it now. Maybe I'll just take away a little bit more length on the side here, a bit that I've missed, and maybe the sideburns could just have a little bit more taken off them. I want this length to be really quite short at the sides. And that's more or less what I was aiming for. And the really cool thing about this new interactive Groom toolkit is that all of the sculpting I've just done is stored in this sculpt layer here, which is really useful because I can always dial it back if I'd gone a little bit too far with it. So you can rename the layers just by double clicking them. So I'm just going to double click this one and call it cut. And to work a little bit non-destructively, I'm going to add another sculpt layer, and I'll call this one brush. In fact, it's more of a comb. and I'm going to change the edit so it happens on the comb layer. So if I click the little edit on the comb, all the edits are going to take place on this sculpt layer now. So the next brush I'm going to show you is the freeze brush, and it's going to allow us to freeze sections of the hair. So I'm going to reset the tool settings and just mirror it across the object x-axis, and I'm just going to start to freeze the side of his hair. I just want it to be relatively accurate because I'm going to create a parting here. So I'm just going to go around the side of the hair. I might as well go around the back as well. And I actually went a little bit too far there, so I'll just undo that and I'll just paint these areas back in again. So we've got the side and the back of the hair frozen, which is going to allow us to get the comb brush and only comb these unfrozen areas. So I'll just reset the comb tool, and now I can just literally click and drag and start styling this hair. But as you can see, when I use the comb brush, it's starting to intersect with the head mesh, which is not what we want at all. So if I just undo the changes I've just done, and you'll see in the tool settings, we've got this option called collide with meshes. So we just turn that on now, and we might want to lower the collision distance. So I've just put that to 0.05. And you can see now when we comb, it's not going to go through the head mesh, it's just going to stay sitting on top of it. So I'm just going to go and start to sculpt his hair backwards, and you'll see when I sculpt the side of his hair, those frozen areas are not going to be affected at all. So with this kind of haircut, it sort of sticks up and round at the side and up at the front, and it sort of usually angles towards one side. So as you can see, it's actually really fun to work with these tools. It's really nice to have the instant feedback in the viewport without having to sort of recalculate the XGen every 2 seconds, and it just works so intuitively. It just speeds up the whole hair creation process massively. So I'm getting this roughly how I want it. Maybe I'll just add a few refinements in. And the next tool I'm going to show you is called the grab brush. And if you've ever worked with ZBrush, the grab tool works pretty much the exact same with XGen as it does in ZBrush. So if I just select the grab brush, and I'll just reset the settings to get them back to default, I'm going to increase the size of the brush here and click this collide with meshes option, and I'll put the collision distance to what we had it before, and you can see I can just pick areas up and sort of lift them away, and it's just so intuitive to work with. You can see I've already started to create the base look of this haircut, and it's only really taken about 5 minutes to get to this point. So I'll just create a few more refinements here, get it to look a little bit more uniform. So I'm quite happy with this now. So the next tool I'm going to show you is called the smooth brush. So if I go into my interactive grooming tools and select the smooth brush, I'll just reset that again, and I'll just change the size to a little bit more. You can see we can just brush the hair with this smooth brush, and it's just going to make the hair a little bit more uniform in style, and what it does is sort of just smooths out the length and the sort of combing that we've done, and we're just left with this really nice uniform looking hairstyle. So I'm going to go back into the freeze brush and invert the frozen selection, and I'm going to click the comb tool again, and now I can start to work on the other parts of the hair that were frozen previously. So I'm going to start to just comb the hair towards the back of the head, and obviously that's created a nice little parting at the side of his hair. And you'll notice that I didn't actually mirror the brush this time, which is no problem because this sort of haircut isn't perfectly symmetrical anyway. So all I'm doing is looking at a reference on my other monitor and sort of just trying to imitate it as best I can. So this is starting to take shape now. I'll just comb it so it sort of angles towards the back, and it's all looking quite slick and smooth. So what I'm going to do is unfreeze all selection in the freeze brush, and now I can start to comb and sort of blend this back area here. So I'm going to get the comb brush and just start combing the hairstyle at the back. So it's merging these both previously frozen and separate areas together. So it really is starting to take shape now, and you can see the speed in which we're doing this as well. So I'm really happy with the way this is coming along, but I think we can benefit from a little bit of smooth brushing around these side areas because they're looking a little bit choppy for my taste. So just going around and just smoothing them really roughly, and it's going to do a really great job of managing that. And I'm pretty happy with the way this is styled so far. I think we could actually get the density brush here, set the operation to decrease, and what I'm going to do is just sort of enhance this parting a little bit. So really easily you can just brush across and create more of a parting in these areas. And from looking at some reference, I've noticed that sometimes these partings are actually shaved into the haircut. So I'm just trying to recreate that now with the density brush, and it's created that on the other side as well, which I'm quite happy with. So I think the next step is just to start refining the way the XGen hairs look, maybe affect the density and the width. So all I need to do is go into my XGen tools at the side, and I need to go into the description and go into the attributes of that, and we can start to affect the width here. So they're obviously way too thick, so if I decrease the width here to, let's say, 0.02, and that's starting to look a lot more like sort of the width of real hair. But what's really going to enhance the look is this taper slider, and that's going to taper the hairs off into a point, just like real hair would do. And what's really useful is they've included this width ramp sort of graph, so that's going to be plotted from the root to the tip, and you can affect the width of the hairs that way. But as you can see, because we've reduced this width, you're starting to see a bit of boldness. So if we go down into the collection, we can increase the density multiplier here, but you need to be a bit careful with this, as it can sort of lag your system if you put it too high. So it's probably a good idea to save before you start messing with this. So I'm just going to save it really quickly. There we go, just overwrite that. And because we've increased this density, you can see that some of the hairs have started to come back where we don't want them, but that's not a problem. We can just go back into the density brush and paint these away. And I'm actually just going to turn the symmetry off here, because I think they're in slightly different places on each side. So it might take a few brush strokes, but you will be able to get rid of them completely. So I'll just do the same on the other side. So I'll just tidy these up as well, and they will go eventually. You might just have to brush them quite hard. And I've just noticed that this sideburn looks a little bit too straight, a little bit too angular, so I'm just going to get the comb brush again, and I'll put the symmetry back on, and I'm just going to comb these and just make them look a little bit more organic. Just looking at the reference, they usually sort of are combed a little bit. It's still just looking a little bit too straight there. And there we go, I can live with that, that's looking pretty good. And what you can see now is if we go back into the XGen toolkit at the side, we can move the sliders for this comb, and you can go back to how it was before, and these are all keyframeable, so that's really useful feature to have. So I'm thinking I might actually just dial this comb back in a little bit. So I've just dialed it to 0.7 there, and I actually really like the look of that. That looks quite a lot better actually. And the next thing I'm going to do that's really going to enhance it is the modifiers. So if I click add modifier and add a noise modifier, and I'll just double click this one and rename it to big noise, and I'll just zoom in on the hair so you can see what effect that's having. So it's just disturbing the hairs using a noise texture, and like all the other layers you can turn this off and on using the little visibility checkbox at the side. So with this big noise modifier, all I'm going to do is reduce the frequency and up the magnitude, and this is going to be our sort of overall noise. It's just going to put sort of a really large kink in the hair, and I might just increase this combing a little bit, just get it to look how you want. But I'll give you a before and after of this noise texture, and you can see what effect that's had. It's just added a big kink to the hair. So I've added a second noise texture in, and this one's going to be fine noise, so really small details. So if I up this frequency slider, you can see it's adding a load of really fine detail, load of little bits of frizz. And I'm just going to put this magnitude really low, because we just want the hairs to look a little bit more organic, not just perfectly straight. So that's looking pretty good. And if you want to add noise in really specific regions, you can use the noise brush, and you can just interactively paint in where you want the noise to be. So I'll just leave all the settings as default for now, and I'm just going to go across this fringe and show you what this brush does. And as you can see, it's just disturbing that fringe with the noise texture. So that's really useful to have. And I think this hair is just getting a little bit too thin, so if I just go back to my haircut 1 description, I'm going to change the width a little bit. So I'll just increase this by 0.1, so it's 0.03, and I'm just going to decrease the density a little bit, which is just going to speed things up, and I think that just looks a little bit better, a little bit fuller. So I'm just going to look at what we've just done. So I can turn the visibility off of this fine noise, and it is a little bit too high, so I can just decrease this magnitude here. We want just a subtle sort of frizz to the hair, we don't want it to be too frizzy. And we can also use this clump brush, and this is just going to allow us to clump sort of regions of hair together. So maybe there's a little bit of grease or oil in the hair, it would go a little bit clumpy around those regions. So it basically just attracts the hairs to each other. I'm going to decrease this clump intensity and just undo what I've just done, and I'm just going to clump together a little bit of this sideburn, and that's not really looking exactly how I wanted. Maybe I'll just leave this sideburn how it was. I think it looked better before, but the clumping is going to be really useful sort of in the fringe area, so I need to turn this strength right down. And like I say, it's just going to make the hair sort of have a tendency to attract together. You might want a really fine brush for this, but I'm just showing you what this does. If you wanted to, you can actually add the clumping as a modifier, just like we did with the noise, but that's just going to apply the clumping to all of the hair, so that's not really what I'm going for here. I would like to just sort of specify the regions where I want the clumping to happen, instead of it just being applied to everything. So I'm just going to go through and add this clumping where I feel necessary. So around the edges is where this clumping is going to sort of look the best. Like all the brushes, it's got a collide with mesh option, so I've just ticked that on so I don't accidentally clump the hairs into the mesh. So maybe I use a slightly larger brush and just disturb this hair a little bit. I'm not mirroring the brush this time because I just want to make it look a little bit more organic and not totally symmetrical. So I think sort of around the edges and around the sides of the hair is where it's going to have the best effect. But the trick is just to spend some time on this. Don't rush it like I'm doing. Obviously you'll get a much better result the more time you spend doing it. And the back of this hair just looks a little bit disturbed, so I'll see if I can smooth that out. And that's not really working. I'd probably be best off going back into the comb brush and just combing that again. But I think we could add a little bit more noise to this fringe as well. So I've just got the noise brush and I'm just sort of going to add a little bit of noise, maybe a little bit of frizz around the edges as well. But it's just about adding these fine details and taking some time, making it look as realistic as possible. But that's pretty much all there is to it. Once again, thank you for watching. This has been the YellowDog 3D Tips blog. Stay tuned for more 3D tips. Cheers.